Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Eleionora Paklons. I come from Belgium, University of Antwerp, and I'm in the final year of my PhD. So I'm now writing, trying to find a red thread through the whole thing and write everything together. And today I'm here to present a bit the whole idea of my PhD, which I think fits the conference's theme really well. But at the same time also present some specific case studies so that you can get an idea of how the occult features in my research, and also how the edge between fact and fiction is really important to my research. So I don't know if any of you have heard of the magic lantern before. Yeah, it's an image projection device that was invented in the mid-17th century, so already an old medium. But it was improved in the 19th century, and it became a real mass medium. So a bit like cinema afterwards. It was used for talks in all kinds of settings, settings like today at university, but also in primary education, at home, in political settings, even on the streets. They used it, for instance, to advertise new shops opening. And it could also be used in opera theater, so it was really everywhere to get big images projected on the wall, like the PowerPoint today, but even way bigger than this, actually. In my research, I mainly look at travelogues, which are actually just travel stories projected with the lantern, because these were actually the most popular application of the lantern. So apart from like religious shows, which were also really popular, so in the church they projected psalms so that people could sing along, and also scenes from the Bible in color and really impressive to keep people tied to the Christian faith. But they also used it for travel stories, so this was the other most popular application of the lantern. And in these travelogues, we always see this dialogue between the real and the imaginary, and I will tell you more about it now. So here you see an example of the average magic lantern. They were quite transportable, so not too heavy. You also had more spectacular ones with 3 lenses, triunials or also biunials with 2 lenses, which could also project movement, actually. So for instance, this slide is called the red eater or the red catcher, and it's a man who is snoring and the mice come into his mouth while he's sleeping, and it's with sound effects and everything. And so it moved and people really liked it. So this was, for instance, a popular comic slide, which was present at almost any presentation to end or start the evening. Here we have a cartoon. I don't know if you know the author. It's Louis Wayne, I think his name is. I should have rechecked, but he was famous for drawing these anthropological cat drawings in the late 19th century and the early 20th century, I think. But this really symbolizes this, edge between fact and fiction, or the real and the imaginary that happens with the lantern as a medium. So they're first looking at a show, a noted ancestor, Puss in Boots. So they're all proud to look at the noted ancestor. But then the mice start to dance, or they say, "Watch it move," and the cats really want to get to the mice. And so here in the penultimate slide, they say, "Keep your seats for the last picture. It is a moving one." And then they all jump into the screen because they can't, separate reality from fiction. So that's just to illustrate the idea that I'm working on in the PhD. And so here are some examples of lantern slides, which are quite beautiful. So they often integrate literally, fact and fiction. So for instance, here in the first slide, you have soldiers sleeping and you have a choir of angels above their heads. And they also often use illustration to convey the eternal, okay, but the eternal dimension, while the photograph is used for the snapshot, the temporary kind of setting, while the illustration is used for like the immortal kind of illustrations. So here again, you have the three kings going to Jesus, and you have a woman praying, and you really have this, coming together of imagination and reality in one picture. And here as well, there's a man who's thinking about his girlfriend who is at home while he is serving in the war, for instance. So that's quite a popular storyline. So these slides really capture this dialogue beautifully. Now I'm going to talk about 3 case studies from my PhD research. So the first one is about Charles Bulls. Some of you may know him. He was the mayor of Brussels in the last 2 decades of the 19th century. And he was a really influential man mainly for the urban planning or the look that Brussels has today. Because he, for instance, saved the Grand Place, like the big marketplace in Brussels, which is, of course, iconic for the city. And he was the mayor while King Leopold II, which is one of the most infamous kings of Belgium, was king. And so he often also had actually kind of fights with Leopold about how he saw the city, because Bulls really was a proponent of kind of traditionalism, like keeping, the traditional elements in the city, the heritage alive, and to, keepsake what's already there and then build from there. But Leopold really wanted to, be a prestigious king, and he wanted to have an impact on the European stage. So he wanted to do all these modernist projects, neoclassical, really big, impressive buildings. And then, destroy the, original look of Brussels, actually, to get to this, prestigious look, which was not tied to Brussels' history or identity. So Bulls was really against this, and when he stepped down as mayor, which was actually also influenced by this conflict with Leopold, he kept trying to influence public debates and try to influence politics by giving magic lantern performances. So we have, I think, 2,000 slides of him in the Brussels City Archive. So he mainly gave talks about his travels, because he was also a huge traveler. Even during his tenure, he often left for months at a time to go to the US or to Indonesia, what other places? Many places around the world, Norway as well. But also Italy. Italy was his favorite destination. He went there every year, especially to Sicily. And this lecture specifically is about, I don't know if you've heard of it, the Messina earthquake of 1908. So this was the most severe earthquake ever recorded since recording started happening. And it happened in late December 1908. And so here you have an image of an example of the destruction that was caused by the earthquake. About 85,000 people died, and 90% of Messina was destroyed. So it's often called the city without memory, because there's nothing left. And Bulls actually, jumped on this opportunity from the news to also push his own agenda for Brussels actually as well. So I will tell you a bit more about how he layered his story. So first we have these images of the earthquake, so destruction. They're often also commercial images. So as you can see here, it says G Summer and Son Naples. So it's a photography company. So he just bought slides. But then these 2 slides are from a German photographer who also had a studio on Taormina. But he was, Wilhelm von Gluden is his name, and he was actually a homoerotic photographer. He photographed quite explicit images of men and boys mainly. But Bulls apparently had a collection of these images, the more tame ones, I would say. And he showed these in public settings, which is quite... I'm still trying to figure out how that worked exactly. He was also an unmarried man. He never had children. So it's a bit, I don't know. It's something maybe to explore, or it's interesting that he could show, these queer images to just public audiences because of his reputation as well, probably, because he was, the mayor or like the former mayor, and people, would take for granted what he was saying and wouldn't, question maybe the kind of images that he would show. But he showed these images, so kind of like reenactor images of antiquity, to really give more emotion to the destruction. So it's not only the current population of Messina that is affected, but also past generations whose blood, tears, and sweat that are soaked into the stones are also destroyed now. And so you can already see it coming a little bit. He just wanted to make a case for preserving Brussels, or where you can preserve it, where nature is not taking it away. You should take care of your urban fabric and make sure that the connection between past and present is preserved. And he also often uses the term resurrection in his lectures. So he really finds this very important to keep this thread to the past. He was also a liberal mayor, so he was very anti-Catholic. And he was also a Freemason, like part of various Freemasonry circles throughout his life. And he also gave a lot of talks there, but unfortunately the material for those Freemason talks is less accessible or less preserved than this material. But yeah, he's a really interesting figure that I think fits this conference's idea of the hidden and or like the old things coming back again, resurfacing, and trying to keep that thread between. It said in the call for papers like the past and the present and the future, and that really I think would have resonated with Bulls as well. This is one of the case studies in my PhD. Then the second one is more explicitly about supernatural themes. So this is about George R. Tweedy. So he was an Englishman who was an analytical chemist. So he had a science background, and he would also start lecturing quite soon. So he gave presentations at the Royal Polytechnic in London, which some of you may know, like it was the big popular science institution of the day. And they also had very spectacular magic lantern slides. These are not very beautiful or aesthetic, I would say, because there are really slides that are very artistic as well, like really almost like oil paintings or hand drawn on the glass. So these are like a bit more rudimentary, but they are like original for this lecture. He made them himself. I don't know how it. I'm still figuring out where he got the images from. But apparently he had a very large collection of supernatural etchings, like original drawings from throughout the centuries that depicted, witchcraft and ghost lore, and he was really well known for this. But so he gave lectures in the Royal Polytechnic, and then he also started to give experimental chemistry shows, like experimental physics, so with explosions and fire and everything. So that was really popular in the late 19th century. But then he started using the lantern, and he was really fond of it. He even was lanternist for other people during their shows, because of course it was sometimes difficult to do both at the same time, because you had to stand with your back to the audience and then speak at the same time. And so it was often like a separate lanternist who did the images and then the person talking, but he was so passionate about it that he did both at the same time, but also projected images for other people. And he was just a very colorful person, and I found so much about him in contemporary newspapers. So that's also like one of my main sources, newspapers, reviews and announcements of lectures. And he was also really sending in, columns, attacking other people, and he was a really colorful person. He was also a politician, like the previous man we saw. So he was also a liberal politician. But he was also interested in the occult and in folklore as well. So he was part of the Folklore Society in England and also of the Society for Psychical Research. And so I think he was a member for about 2 or 3 years. I've not established this exactly yet. It's a bit difficult to get to the exact details of his membership, but in any case, he had this large collection of images, and he gave a very popular show about it, which was called Gossip About Ghosts. And so it was a really popular show. In the newspapers, I have found like 30 reviews or something, which is quite a lot for numerically speaking for this type of show, and also quite extensive reviews. So people were really fond of it. So in his show, he told about, I think, 47 or 50 ghost stories. So a lot of them are like, more from a folkloric approach, like in Devon once there was, these kinds of stories. But he also, which is interesting, adds contemporary discussions of spiritualism and occultism to his discussions of these images and these stories. So he, for instance, names Helena Blavatsky, and he says that the interest in spook hunting has become like way more pronounced since she, brought it to the stage in England. But at the same time, he also mocks her beliefs. So he says, astral spirits or external spirits are, they don't exist. It's only people that have, a weak imagination or like, a troubled mind that see these things. But at the same time, he also uses, for instance, explanations like telepathy to explain ghost sightings. And he also backs his cases up by saying, the Society for Psychical Research has studied this, so it's, a reliable kind of explanation for this sighting. So he was really, treading this boundary between, are ghosts real or is it complete nonsense? And that was also what people found interesting about going to his lectures, to think for themselves, I guess. To just see, what's real, what's not real. And there's an interesting quote from one of the reviews that ends with the words, "These shady and midnight visitors the lecturer put down to imagination and mental depression, but nevertheless, some of the anecdotes related of things which have happened in this country during the last 50 years and which he stated were authenticated were of such a marvelous and supernatural character that many people present must have gone away, not quite convinced that ghosts do not flit about the earth even in the 19th century. So it's like, these really colorful reviews, and people were really interested in hearing about, these supernatural stories. And so this is like an example of how the ideas about the supernatural were communicated in more of the public sphere or the popular sphere. So I think it's interesting to see how these notions were articulated in these different settings than a closed society or it actually was also part of the public domain in a way, and so it's interesting to look at that. And then finally, my last case study is this woman, so Olive Murray Chapman. She's also an English woman, and she was also a solo traveler, like her husband, sorry, in Dutch it's called man. Her husband passed away, and then she had his fortune, and so she just, traveled. But she went, for instance, to the Himalaya, to India, but also to Finland, to Lapland, and also to Iceland, which is probably the case study that I will be focusing on most. And it's interesting because she's from the 1930s, so it's a bit later in my period. The other case studies are all from like fin de siècle, late 19th century, early 20th. But this is in the 1930s, and the lantern was still, one of the main media to use when you were giving these public talks. And so she also used the magic lantern, but she also published like written travel accounts. So, for instance, on her travels to Iceland, I think it's called Land of Ash and Fire or something. But she also gave lectures about it. And she's also like often reviewed in the newspapers, so that's always a good source to get to know a bit of the the audience response. It's always difficult to get to this the live event or the performance, but I try to do so in my in my research. And so interestingly, she says, okay, it's now the 1930s, so exploration is, or like traditional exploration is almost done. You know, we know what the world looks like. We have charted most places, like we as the West or like English people. But there's still other exploration to be done at which women are really well suited, for which women are really well suited. And that's like mental exploration, so to get to know how people live, and especially how women and children live in other countries. So in Iceland, for instance, she really, emphasizes getting this connection with the local population, with children and women. And she says that women, are better suited because they're easier to be trusted or something by the local populations. But she really makes a case for this in the newspapers, saying, okay, other women should do this as well. We are, really good at this, actually. But at the same time, she was also, again, unexpectedly, like I just, found this while looking at other articles about her travel lectures. She was also interested in kind of the supernatural. And she gave a lecture for the Reading Society for Psychical Investigation, so near London, in the 1930s. And this is a review of what she said, and it's only part of it because it's a really long review, and I was thinking which part I should show you. But yeah, this is just to give you an idea of what's in there. So seldom, said the speaker, has there been a time when there was more widespread interest in the subject of life after death than at the present day. It is discussed in newspapers and debated on public platforms, yet we are told we are living in a materialistic age. In one sense, I suppose we are, but at the same time, behind it all is, I am convinced, the mind of God working for spiritual progress of mankind. It is our privilege today to benefit by marvels of modern scientific research and discovery. From our own fireside, we can, by means of wireless sets, hear music and listen to voices from the other side of the world. Yet wireless waves always have been in existence, waiting for man to tap them, to harness them to his own use. There is nothing new in all the world, although there may still well be undiscovered wonders which we as yet know nothing of. And so this is just a part of what she's saying, but her point in this article is actually that you can be psychic without, or be a good psychic without being spiritual, which she, I think, interprets as being Christian, or like knowing, the Bible and doing it in the right way for good purposes. And otherwise you might, attract malicious things to yourself, or get into trouble. So she's really, making a case actually for mediumship, but from this Christian angle. And she also mentions that in Iceland, when she was traveling there, a lot of people believe in psychic abilities, but they do not realize the importance of also, having the spiritual side when doing psychic, having psychic experiences or cultivating your psychic gifts. This is also a really unexpected, place where this interest in the occult and this boundary between the real, the unreal pops up in my research. And so when I started, because I have a bit more time, when I started 3 years ago, I didn't think I would, put so much of the supernatural or of occultism or in my research. But now it like pops up in almost every chapter. I also have a final chapter on magnetism in the 19th century. You probably know him, Jean-Martin Charcot. He was a doctor at the Salpêtrière in Paris. He used actually the magic lantern to induce states of catalepsy, so as part of hypnosis. And we have also images of mostly female patients who faint in front of the light beam, so they get the light just gets shined. What's the word? Shown into their eyes, and so they just freeze, or they get into this state of it's some kind of influential state where they also, with colored lenses, for instance, can provoke emotions in these patients. So, for instance, melancholy or happiness or anger. They also experimented with this, and so this is also part of the PhD. So It will also end in a book that we are now editing as well, with a new network on magnetism. And so, yeah, it's just popped up everywhere. And yeah, when I read this call for papers, it really resonated just with, you know, the red line that I see, or like the central line that I see appearing in my PhD now. And I just wanted to, you know, give you an idea of how I see this in my work and maybe discuss what you think of it. And also, I myself am like not from a religious studies or esotericism background. So if you know if you have something to add to, you know, make my story more nuanced or make it richer, it's definitely very welcome. And this is like the final image. Maybe I can also quickly tell you a little bit about this slide. So this is, as you see, it's like a spirit photograph, you know, double exposure, where they, you know, get this specter into the room with another actor. And so this is an example of a live model slide, of lantern slide. So this was one popular genre where you have, you know, a real life actor who is often in a painted set and has props, actually like in the theater. So he's like dressed and he has props, and there's this storyline. And also early film, of course, afterwards was, you know, really influenced by this kind of way of narrating. And you even have, like, when early film starts getting used, you know, parallel early films and lantern sets. So they actually have the same, you know, images, but the slides are just the stills of the film. And so they get sold at the same time. They also get shown at the same time, so people are interested for different reasons in both media. But here you see a spirit photograph, and the story here is a classic story of, you know, a temperance story. So in the late 19th century in England, there was this really strong moral campaign, you know, to get the working classes to, be more like the middle classes, I think we could say, like short-handed, but and so they wanted them to, you know, abstain from alcohol, abstain from, not get venereal diseases, not get TBC as well. So they also put this in the bunch with these other moral problems. And so one of the ways they, you know, told these stories was by invoking a ghost. So in this case, we have a man, a working class man, Roger, who, you know, spends the whole family fortune in drinking at the pub. But then one day he gets visited by this ghost, you know, in a kind of Dickensesque way, who shows him what his future will look like if he continues, you know, going down this path. And so he shows him also in one slide the coffin of his son, on which is written dead by a drunken father or something. So, and the ghost is in almost all the images of the set. And so, of course, the story in the end ends with Roger is his name, waking up, and he realizes, oh, it was just a dream. Now I can, you know, better my life. And but it's interesting that, you know, at the time they used this ghost, you know, because, it probably meant that it kind of resonated with people in the audience, like that they, you know, attributed some kind of, you know, value to it, or would be scared indeed of this image. While it is, of course, at the same time quite clear that this is manipulated, because it's like, you know, part of a story, you know, part of a staged story. So yeah, this is also an interesting dynamic that I'm not sure yet how I'm going to explain it. But yeah, just some other interesting things that popped up in my research. And my research is part of this project, so if you want to look a bit more or send me an email, you're always welcome to. So yeah, thank you. That's all I have, I think. Thank you.